I'm a journalist, and I'd like to say I'm one of those traditional ones that just wants to tell the story and is not in it for myself at all. In the end, though, that's a lie. I'm a journalist because it's what I went to school for, and I went to school for it because I found English came naturally to me. As a journalist, I've always loved being the conveyance of a story, as opposed to the story itself. I've crafted my career around editing and production so that my name is rarely, if ever, attributed to any piece, despite the hours of work editing, assigning, crafting, and presenting the story. So imagine our surprise when I tell my wife that I want to start a YouTube channel. My quavering voice for all to hear, my mediocre video editing for all to see. My first video discusses the reasons why I decided to do this. But I think on a deeper level, I do have a certain level of pride in my ideas, and I want to share them despite the inevitable clapback and embarrassment. In my first video, I talk about the genesis of this channel and how I want to find connections that I didn't even know were there. My second, and first real video was going to be about the game that made me fall in love with video games at the start. But something was nagging at me. A certain oddly shaped jar in a certain classic video game I realized was actually far more important to this channel than the game that made me love games. So, that video is TK for now, while I explore the secrets of Phantasy Star 4's oddly shaped jar. TK is a journalism term, a remnant of an era long past when not only was editing an art, it was deeply respected. Something that has been totally obliterated by the internet and its need for immediacy. TK is meant to be a placeholder, standing for to come or not here yet, a remnant of a time when we could wait. A time that the Arcade Fire yearns for in their Suburbs hit, We Used to Wait. I was listening to Watch Out for Fireballs sometime last year, and one of the hosts mentioned that it was also used because it stood out. T and K are letters that do not exist beside each other in the English language. I've been a journalist for nearly 20 years, and here I am learning basic terminology from a podcast. It was a humbling experience. It was either Cole Ross on Watch Out for Fireballs or Will Hughes on Everything to Guppy that said this. T and K are letters that never appear beside each other in the English language. I don't know if this is true, and I'm not going to fact check it, but this small aside totally blew my mind. The TK was chosen not because it is almost to come, but because eagle-eyed editors could spirit the letter combo away when the content either came in or didn't. The reason I bring this up is because even with my 20 years experience in the business, I did not know that it was this simple visual signal that was the reason for the industry to come up with the concept of TK. This struck me as important. It showed me you cannot stop learning, and you cannot even choose your teachers. In truth, it was a turning point in my whole concept of this channel. I did not want to just ramble on about some interesting things in video games. There's enough of that on YouTube already. I wanted to tease out the ideas and themes that can help foster moments of connection, moments of teaching, or rather exposing different ideas to people to help them create their own tapestry for the world. You can find inspiration in the oddest of places and learn new things from utterly random encounters. And it's a beautiful feeling, an unequaled experience, and I hope my channel and the story of Phantasy Star 4's oddly shaped jar bring about the same feeling I had from that off-topic, inside baseball, possibly apocryphal origin story of the journalism term TK. Though it was not the first game that I truly loved, as mentioned, that story is TK, Phantasy Star 4 is permanently embedded in my mind. The game takes you places, man. This spacefaring adventure spans every planet in the Algol solar system, but it starts out humble and small, as they all do, really. You're a neophyte hunter, tasked with exterminating the infestation of monsters in the planet's most prestigious university. The planet you're on, Motavia, is in the process of desertification, and it's getting worse. On top of the climate problems, recently monsters have started appearing everywhere, making travel between towns near impossible. This has created a thriving market for these hunters to put down monster infestations and escort people between towns and cities. You are Chaz. Yes, you heard it right, Chaz. An apprentice to the most famous and well-respected hunter on Motavia, Alice Bragwin. This small job of exterminating monsters from the university leads to more questions. You eventually discover that beneath the surface of the planet is a vast network of machinery and computers that exist to control the planet's climate. They're malfunctioning after eons, and that's what's causing the problems. Throughout your journey, you hear whispers and hints of this man, Zio, who has formed a cult of worshippers and seems to be behind the recent problems that Motavia is experiencing. You meet some cool companions too. First it's Han, the researcher who desperately wants to solve the problems the world is facing, but he's a weakling. So when he constantly begs Alice to take him along, she makes sure he pays. Then there's also Grizz, who wants to kill Zio because Zio destroyed his village. The village in question is where you meet Ruin, who is perhaps the most important person in this solar system, but you don't know that until much later. In the meantime, he spends most of his time making fun of Chaz. After searching far and wide for the source of the recent monster outbreak, during which you find out that Han is actually engaged and has been spending his wedding fund to pay Alice, that Zio has turned an entire town into stone, something that you undo, and that the main reason that monsters are breeding out of control is that the bioengineering AI, Seed, which was initially tasked with ensuring the biodiversity of the planet, has lost control of the underlying power source of all the systems in place, and that the only way to stop the spread is to shut down Motavia's nervous center. The only way to do that is to find the android Demi, who was captured by Zio, of course. Zio also just so happened to build his megachurch on top of the nervous center as well. It's all coming into place. Before saying goodbye, Seed sends Rika, an artificial human, but living the sheltered life that she has, she really yearns to see the blue of the mountain and the smell of the ocean. Once his creation is out in the world, this magnanimous AI, a common theme in this game, quite the opposite of Phantasy Star 2 actually, self-destructs to stem the tide of monsters, offering some respite for the crew. The game's first act culminates in you trying to kill Zio only to be utterly rebuffed. Then this happens. Sacrificing herself for her protege, Chaz, Alice is bedridden, and the only thing that anyone can think of is to seek out the help of Rune, who fucked off earlier with the lecherous Motavian grandfather Doran. Having saved Demi before being rebuffed by Zio, left us with no way still to get to the nervous center to shut it down and save the planet. However, Demi has an idea. She helps us out with the Land Rover, a special item that can get us across the miles of quicksand that pockmark the landscape. On our way to find Rune, you kill some sandworms, save a local town, and the scaredy cat Grizz from a horrendous earthquake. You find a little town that honors the, quote, heroine of yore, which is a reference to Alice Landell, the main character and hero of the first Phantasy Star game. But eventually you catch up to Rune, and you realize that he has the same goals as you. Kill Zio. And to do so, he needs a special item to diffuse the barrier that made him invincible in your original fight. Once you receive it, both Rika and Rune can feel it. The power of Zio is increasing, and it seems that Alice is at death's door. The party zooms back to Alice's bedside, and then... This might be the first time in any game that the ostensibly main character dies. Games have always had characters die before, but when you started this game, you're under the impression that Alice is the main protagonist. It's a gut punch. Chaz, in all his newbie nonsense, now has the game's entire mantle of responsibility placed on his shoulders, just like you, the player. It is an intense scene, and I will admit that when I played through this game for footage recently, the music and the moment moved me to tears. But now it's time for revenge. Alice is buried, and the party runs off to take that bastard down. With the help of Rune, we dive deep into the planet's nervous center and confront the big baddie. If you go in not knowing anything, this is essentially the end of the game. But when he breathes his final breath, Zio utters the words, "Dark Force." Fans of the series will know that this means there is much left to do, and it starts with space travel. Yes, that's right. This game that's hinted at being science fiction, but has thus far been closer to fantasy, is going to space. Before going into space, however, There is so much more to Phantasy Star 4 than just the broad strokes. What I'm here to talk about is the places where no one goes, and it starts with one of the very first rooms that you find yourself controlling Chaz, back at the university. One of the great things about this game is if you look around and press the Engage With button on your console of choice, you'll come across particularly curious bits of flavor text on most items. One stood out for me when I was a kid. Quote, "What an oddly shaped jar." Phantasy Star 4 was the first game I ever bought. It came out at a time before I could get a job legitimately, so, like many at the time, I had a pittance of an allowance from my parents. The game came out in 1993, but I mustn't have been able to buy it until 1994 because it was $99 plus 15% tax. And that would have taken forever to save up at $5 a week every so often. To put this in perspective, the price that is, $100 in 1993 is about $185 in today's money. Can you imagine the gamer uprising if a 25-hour JRPG came out today at that price? That's Civ 7 Collector's Edition money, baby. Regardless, it took forever for me to save up for that old cartridge, and it was one of the only cartridges that I did not divest myself from when I purged my collection in the 2010s. I struggled to get this game. It was at a time before I had access to credit, and I had no recourse but to save. I do not have a good relationship with my older half-sister, but one of the things I have to give her credit for is nabbing the games from her nerd burnout friends for me and my little sister to play. One of them was Phantasy Star 2. Phantasy Star 2 is one of the momentous games of the 1980s that very few people ever talk about. Kudos to Watch Out for Fireballs Gary Butterfield for being one of the people out there that shares this small part of the pool with me, where no one goes. I have never won Phantasy Star 2. As a child, I was never able to beat it, and even as an adult, I crushed it right to the end, but decided to let it live in my memory as a hallowed game that I love, but never won. More on that in an upcoming video. In it, though, I was endlessly enthralled by its unique take on the JRPG genre. Its ever-expanding journey, its androids, its concepts, its art, its uniqueness. Phantasy Star 3 also came my way via one of those burnouts, and I never won that game either. But there is something so special about this series that it sticks with me 30 years later. There is a point in the second game where you visit another planet, and when you try to talk to anyone, it's all gibberish. Until you manage to get an item that translates their words. Talk about challenging the player. No developer would have the balls to do something like that nowadays. This brings me back to my tangent earlier about TK. The style guide of Canada's premier newspaper, the Globe and Mail, actually states, or at least it did a decade ago, or perhaps I'm Mandela affecting this into existence. Regardless, it states that when a city is the capital of a country, no matter how low profile the country is, you do not put the name of the country after the name of the city in the dateline. For instance, it's Baku, not Baku, Azerbaijan. And I love this. The explanation is to, quote, challenge the reader, and I love when video games challenge the player. The Algol solar system is world design at its best. Its atmosphere is unparalleled. It just ignited my 10-year-old mind in a way that really meant something in the long term. So when I saw that there was a fourth game in this hallowed and befuddling series, I needed it, and I needed it bad. What strikes me as I look back at this time is my severely limited field of vision for video games. I don't think I was even at a point where I actually read video game magazines, for instance. As an aside, for the youngs, magazines are a medium that was ascendant in the 20th century. They involved a bound stack of paper in which ink printed ideas and opinions and pictures. Their, quote, editors were gods among people and held the only key to the culture of the moment. The internet destroyed them, though they cling like barnacles to the hull of the ascending ship that is Web 2.0. while Web 3.0 waves goodbye from its pearlescent nothing realm where neither ascent nor descent matters. Beyond the lack of awareness that I had for the greater world at the time, I also had no idea how to buy video games. I mentioned earlier that the place I kept frequenting was Canadian Tire. For those non-Canadians out there, that store specializes in car repair and household goods. At the time, back in the 90s, they had a single kiosk of video games. It was behind a bulletproof plastic wall, and it was locked. And whenever I went in, I admired the Phantasy Star 4 cartridge case, whatever you would call it back in those days, and I would be very sad at its $99.95 plus tax price tag. I waited and saved for so long, I eventually dumped the entire $114.95 after tax, that's $213.47 in today's Canadian dollars, and $157.08 in today's USD. And I bought this shiny new son of a bitch. It was the last time I trusted the market without reservation, because within months of me buying this beast, it dropped in price by at least 65%. At the exact store that I bought it in. Fuck capitalism. Not for the super online and super historian reasons. I respect the hell out of Austin Walker, don't get me wrong. But for the purely capitalistic, self-centered reason that it fucked me. That was it. Childhood's end. With the game in hand, I continued my exploration of the Algol solar system, and it did not disappoint, despite the steep cost. After you defeat Zeo, you make your way to the artificial satellites that orbit Motavia, the true control centers of the vast maintenance network that's keeping the planets alive. You recruit Ren, an android who was also in Phantasy Star 2 and 3, and that blew my mind. You learn the true evil is elsewhere, and after some sabotage, you crash land on Dezolis and meet another Lech in the Dezolian Raja. But he's more hilarious than Grandfather Doran, and is frankly top tier at the end of the game. It turns out that Dezolis is also experiencing unending snowstorms, making movement from city to city nigh impossible. Sound familiar? It's clear something is causing everything to run amok throughout Algol, and in order to fix it, you'll need another ship. Thankfully, one of the main characters from Phantasy Star 2, Tyler, stored his ship under the town that he founded back in that game. The town is also hilariously named Tyler. In perfect Where No One Goes fashion, one of the most striking aspects of Dezolis is the massive, bottomless pit in the center of the map. It's not commented on, but it was also there in Phantasy Star 2, and it was called Skewer, if I remember correctly. It was also a dungeon in that game, and it was another one of those things that truly piqued my "there must be more to this" instinct. And we'll get to that in the next chapter. I wanted to mention this because it's masterfully mysterious, and I love it. Ren is certain the issue lies in the satellites that control all the systems of Algol, but Raja is adamant that the issue lies with Garuburk Tower, a structure that appeared overnight just as the snowstorm started. Again, does this not sound familiar? All we're missing is Zeo. We quell the issues with the satellites, and Raja is vindicated because nothing changed. So the team races back to Dezolis to take on this tower. After some globetrotting, Raja falls ill, and it's revealed that some entire towns are also succumbing to this plague that is eerily similar to what happened to Alice on Motavia. We befriend the Espers, another callback to Phantasy Star 2, including a new compatriot, Kyra, who is certain that the leader of the Espers, Lutz, will know how to burn the forest of carnivorous trees that surround the Garuburk Tower. Anyway, we race off to the Esper Mansion, at the edge of Skewer, the void I talked about earlier, and are granted an audience with Lutz. And as you can see, that's right, Ruin, the wisecracking guy who's been on Chaz's ass all game, is Lutz. This was truly a masterful turn in a game in 1993. Well done, Phantasy Star 4. Ruin accesses Lutz's memories and learns that the Eclipse Torch can burn anything and everything. We race to the temple to receive it, and it is stolen by some baddies, who, in an unnecessary aside, much like all my ramblings in these videos, force a detour to the Air Castle, the last remnant of the first planet in Algol, the center of its civilization. We race over there in our spaceship and beat the final boss from Phantasy Star 1 again, who has been living there in a state of undeath for thousands of years. It's actually a cool dungeon, but so long and such a detour that even fans of this game will likely forgive me for moving on. You get the Eclipse Torch back, burn the carnivorous trees, and finally take on Garuberk Tower. As you ascend this fleshy, monstrous mound, you get the idea that this is the end. And the game greets you with Dark Force, the end boss of most of the other games in this series, at the end of it. You beat the bastard. The snowstorm stops. But the dark energy can be felt by those attuned to it is still here, and disasters still occur. It's clear by what happens next that there is something even greater emerging into Algol, and through the knowledge of Lutz and the oldest monk in Dizolis, the answer lies in the Arrow Prism, and something called Rycross. The gang goes back to Motavia to find the Arrow Prism, which when held by Chaz immediately points to coordinates in space, but they seem to be empty. The only thing to do is to go there and find out. Then, boom. Rycross, the elliptical fourth planet in Algol, appears. There we learn from omniscient beings that Algol is actually the site of a galactic battle between the Great Light and the Profound Darkness. The light won and sealed the darkness in another dimension and placed the Algol solar system at the rift as a seal. Every 1,000 years, the seal weakens, and those timelines correspond with all the previous games in the series. The light, long gone now, has chosen Chaz and his cohorts to be the guardians this round. And because of the destruction of Parma in Phantasy Star 2, it's not just Dark Force this time. It's the actual profound darkness that comes out. In a brave and not of its time move, Chaz immediately rejects this bullshit ordained heroes trope and tells the omniscient beings off. He'll make his own decision. Ultimately, it comes down to saving the people he loves. God, I love this game. So, I destroyed the profound darkness, I beat the game, but I was riding high and I wanted more, and that's when I had another run-in with capitalism that left me sour. That oddly shaped jar from that introductory area in the game hooked me and hooked me hard. There must have been more to it. There must have been more for me to eat up when it came to the lore of this world and this game. This was long before the explosion of Vati Vidya, Smotown, and other people who make their livings over analyzing the intricacies of minutia in video games. Those loresters came along decades later. But for me, as a 10-year-old in 1994, I have to say I had expectations that were decades ahead of their time, and it all started with the oddly shaped jar. Certainly, I thought, undoubtedly, there was more to this jar than meets the eye. There must have been something deeper, a backstory, a reason for the placement of this text and the coding involved in placing it there. The idea of, quote, flavor was foreign to me at the time. I needed to know more. It continued throughout the game whenever I would go around and hit the interact button with part of the background and get a little bit of flavor text. Seeing the fabric of the world woven one stitch at a time was brilliant to me. and it couldn't have just been flavor text. It had to be something more. And it went on. In my unbridled mind, I assumed it all meant something. In fact, I made this very argument to my parents while pleading for the money to buy the Official Player Guide Phantasy Star 4. Yes, that's its name, Official Player Guide Phantasy Star 4. I saved up my allowance again, and I believe my parents actually did chip in a bit on this one. I was hooked on this game, and I wanted more. I wanted every little morsel of information that I could find on it. Now again, for the youngs, in the 90s the internet didn't exist yet, and the hoops I needed to jump through to get this were plentiful and exquisite. I honestly wish we wanted for things like we did in the 90s. So to start, I needed to see the stitched-in insert in my copy of GamePro. Then, literally, I had to mail a check, then wait 6 to 8 weeks for them to deliver the product to me by mail. In this case, we did all this and I waited for 8 weeks, checking the mail every day. Nothing. And I was sad. First world problems, yes, but I did not have a rich social life. I was a really weird little boy. I do remember crying. When it didn't come, we sent another letter to them asking where the hell the guide was and what was going on with our $49.99. No response. Over the next 6 to 8 weeks, my soul died a little more than it already had. Then, one day, I was walking my dog Bo to the mailbox. We lived in a subdivision and did not have our own. Instead, we had a community mailbox that was around the corner. I had made picking up the mail a fun little thing I always did. I still remember it fondly to this day. I opened up our little safe deposit box looking mail slot and I saw this huge wad of paper. I pulled it out and found a crumpled white envelope that looked ancient, had probably been dropped in a few puddles, and I remember it was kinda moist. But I knew what it was. Inside the scary envelope was not one but 2 copies of Official Player Guide Phantasy Star 4, and I was, for a moment, so happy. They must have ignored our first mailing and then sent us 2 copies as an apology. I raced home, cutting poor Bo's walk short, which is unfortunate because that dog did not get walked enough. I ripped open the books and proceeded to devour them in all their glory. But, well, this chapter's title is Shit Product, Shit Lore for a reason. Anyone watching this who owned the guide knows where this is going. Not only was there not even a mention of the jar, the guide was in black and white, on tissue-thin paper, and didn't even include some of the secrets and Easter eggs that I had found on my own. I haven't gone into my gaming habits at the time, but I went deep and hard on everything. Not only have I mapped every single pixel in this and other well-loved Genesis games, I have also already plumbed the depths of the glitches that only testers see. For instance, there is a secret macro called Destruct that you can only do with the final 4 mandatory characters. Many sources say that you need to put your most powerful skills and text on these 4 characters into a macro for this to happen, but this is not true. Rika needs to be using the Deban spell, which raises defense. Further, it's actually a terrible spell, because it only does 999 damage, the max. Whereas if you did the moves without the macro, you're getting a defense boost from Rika and around 1500 damage with Chaz and his Megid spell, Ruin and his Legion skill, and Ren and his Pausabolt skill. This was another thing I was hoping to understand through this guide, with its expected lore-based and mechanic-based depth. Instead, I didn't even get a mention of Destruct. It hadn't even done the work. It was on shitty tissue paper, I was a better source of PS4 lore, and I had more ideas and theories about the oddly shaped jar than it could have ever fathomed. And the internet didn't exist yet. I know this sounds very precious, but it was a fall from grace, a moment where the unending possibilities that I thought the world held for me became instead walls and boundaries. The realm of the impossible rather than the possible. It was a moment that I lost a spark. And that, in the end, is what I'm trying to get back by sharing these stories of places where no one goes, themes no one sees, and ideals that become harder and harder to see as we age. The tears of joy always dry up, but their well, I need to believe, is verdant and ready to spring at any moment. For you see, despite everything that happened with Phantasy Star 4 for me, the exorbitant price, the massive amount of disappointment in the official player guide, despite all of this, I love this game, and I just played through it again for footage, and I loved every second of it. It makes me feel so freaking good. When Chaz struck the final blow on the profound darkness, Phantasy Star 4's epic ending ensues. I had an aha moment, one of the first in my life. That is one of the seeds that grew into this channel. The game, I think, says it best. The long battle is over. We were able to free ourselves from the terrible curse of yore. To the souls of those who sacrificed their lives for Algol, sleep in peace. From person to person, from age to age, as long as memories last, we will not forget the sacrifices that have been made. This was the first time that I realized, as I said a long time ago, you can't stop learning and you can't even choose your teachers. In this age of complete connection, we are all alone, all of us. We can see everything, but we are none of us seen. We must, all of us, remember the things that deepen our connection to our fellow people. And to me, these feelings that stirred when I was barely sentient, a weird little kid, they brought me closer to understanding that it is through shared experience, shared hardship, that the best in humanity comes out. I want the lonely people out there to know that you are all seen, and I hope that in writing this, though I might be alone in my memories, perhaps now I'll be seen too. And that's Phantasy Star 4, and the long, unending story of the major problems I had with that game, playing it first, and then being disappointed in its lack of lore, and then being also disappointed in people putting out official player guides that suck. All of this when I was only 10 years old. It's an interesting thing to look back on. And as always, I'd like to thank the people whom I talked about in this video again. Watch out for Fireballs. It's an amazing podcast. Go subscribe and on their Patreon, do all that stuff. Everything to Guppy is on the same network as Watch Out for Fireballs. I think it's about some game called Guppy or something. I really don't know. But it's awesome. Anyway, I also want to shout out, obviously, the king of YouTube, Vati Vidya, and the other king of YouTube, Smotown, for their amazing work that they've done with the Souls games and their lore videos. I've watched all of them. They're amazing, amazing people. But in the end, I want to thank you all for sticking with this video, if you have. I hope you enjoyed going where no one else goes together. See you on the next one.